Hello, this is Mr. Stansbury. I'm going to take you through the 16G notes on cosine functions. At the end of this, you should be able to say I can graph a cosine function, and also I can find the equation of a cosine graph. Okay. So before I do that, I'm actually going to kind of show you something here that I found on the internet. It's something that kind of hopefully help you better understand what the sine curve looks like, and then once you understand the sine curve, it'll help you understand the cosine curve as well. So ignore this down here for now. Let's just look at this here for the sine function. Okay, so as you take this here and you move this up, so this is at 30 degrees. So at 30 degrees, this is your point on your sine graph. So really what that is that's just the relationship between, on a right triangle here, it's a relationship between the opposite side and the hypotenuse. Okay, so that is, it's just what the height of this here. So as you'll notice, as this goes up, this height here goes up, so does this here. So again at 60 degrees, you're all the way up here, and then at 90 degrees, you're up here at the top. Okay, so it's really on this right triangle here, it's just this height right here. It's just this opposite side of the angle. Okay, because if you'll remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so that's why it is this height here. Okay, same idea works for cosine. So now ignore this one, take a look at this here. As we move this up here, say to 30 degrees or so, now the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So that's how far away this point is from dead center here. So it's the red piece here. So you'll notice that all the way out here at 0, it's already at 1. So cosine curve actually starts at 1. Okay, we're actually going to end up taking this graph here and we're going to rotate it so that it looks more like this sine curve here. But anyway, so it's the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, so that is this side here versus the hypotenuse piece, which if this is a unit circle, it's always just 1. Okay, so now again, as you'll see, as we're getting closer and closer to 90 degrees, this red line here is getting shorter and shorter, so it's getting closer and closer to 0, which is what it hits when we get up to 90. So now it's right there on the midline there. Get all the way out here to 180 degrees, and it is now at the smallest point, which is -1. Okay, and then there's -1. And it comes all the way back around here and is made 360 degrees. Okay, so hopefully that'll help a little bit. All right, so with that, let's take a look at our cosine curve. So again, cosine started at 1 and then went all the way down at 180 degrees. It was at -1 and goes back up to +1 by the end of its period, which is 360 degrees, just like the sine curve. All right, so here's the sine curve and here's the cosine curve. Now something that's a little bit interesting is actually they're identical curves, meaning that they have the exact same shape and size. The only thing different is that they're just shifted. This one here, if you take this and you shift it 90 degrees, like basically you shift it over to the right 90 degrees, and you'll end up with your sine curve. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So here's the sine curve. Here's the cosine curve. If I take my sine curve and I move it back 90 degrees here, it ends up being exactly the same thing as the cosine curve. Okay, or if I took my cosine curve and I moved it to the right 90 degrees, it would end up being the exact sine curve. Okay, all right, so period on this one here, this cosine curve, is 360 degrees. Period for the sine curve is also 360 degrees, right? Because that's how long it takes from beginning to end and where it starts repeating. Okay, so with that, we are going to graph some stuff. We're going to graph this here. All right, first let's take a little video break.
I know judges are not allowed to give out cruel or unusual punishment. Cruel, of course, but unusual, I mean, who's to say? I'm sure some judges have bumped up against the line on that one. For your punishment, I want you to place a slice of bologna upon your face. Cut out the eye holes. I want you to put on some burlap shoes. Go to the local mall and begin yodeling. Objection, Your Honor, a bit unusual, don't you think? All right, 10 days in jail.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to sketch the graph of these two cosine functions. Okay, so we're going to want to have some graphs on here. So again, if you remember from before, it's usually wisest to start with this first, and this second, and then this third is usually what we go through and figure out. So first off, we're going to take the whole graph and go up 1. So the principal axis here is at 1. The amplitude is 2, so that means it goes up 2 from the principal axis to get to the max, and then also goes down 2 from the principal axis to get the minimum. Whoa, that's terrible handwriting. You get the idea though. Okay, and then the last thing here is at 0.5. So remember, we're going to take always take the period 360 and divide by what number they give us, 0.5, and that gives us 720 degrees. So the period is going to take 720 degrees to complete. Now remember, cosine graph looks like, let's see, cosine graph looks like this. Here's 1, here's -1, here's 360, there's 180. Cosine graph looks like, that's awful, but you get the idea. Remember, it kind of looks like that. So we know that this graph here is going to start up here at the top, and it's going to take 720 degrees to repeat. So there's 720, so there's the repeat part. Halfway in between the two maximums is the minimum. So halfway in between, which is at 360, is the minimum. Halfway in between those 2 points is where it's going to cross the principal axis. So halfway between those two, across the principal axis. Halfway between these two, it crosses at the principal axis. And then here is going to be our graph. Hey, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good graph. I'm not going to lie. Okay. Let's look at this one, and then we have one last example, and we're done. All right, so this one here, we're going to start down 3 for the principal axis. Right? That's a P. And then it's negative. So we have to assume that's -1. -1, I don't know, my pen's not working on that, but that's -1 cosine. So it goes up 1 for the max, and then down 1 for the minimum. All right. And then let's see, we take 360 and divide it by whatever number's in front of x. So that means our new period is 180 degrees. All right. Now remember, it starts at +1, but this here, since this here is negative, that means it starts at the minimum instead of the maximum, since it's negative. Okay, so it starts down here at -1 since it's negative. Oh, sorry, negative. It's the minimum since from the principal axis. So it starts at the minimum, and it takes 180 degrees to get back to that spot right there. Halfway in between is the max. Halfway in between the minimum and the maximum is where it crosses the principal axis. Same thing there. And then we should be able to just repeat this thing here. So every 180 degrees, it repeats. Right, and then halfway in between all those, it's going to be at the top. Right, and then halfway in between all of these minimums and maximums are going to be where it crosses the principal axis, or it's back at 0. All right, and then once we have that, we connect all of our lovely dots. And you can make sound effects as you do it. All right, so there's that. Last thing is to find the equation of the cosine graph. I know we're running a little long, so let's polish this off really fast. Y equals a cosine bx plus c, right? So we can tell right here is the middle, because here's the max is at 2 and the minimum's at -4, so halfway in between that is at -1. Oops. That does not belong there. That belongs like that. All right, so we know that this is, oops, not +1, but -1. Amplitude from here to here is 3. So it's 3 cosine. And it starts at the bottom. So it's supposed to start at the top, which is positive. If it starts at the bottom, that means it's negative. So it's negative. So it's y equals -3 cosine. And then we just have to figure out the period. So it takes 180 degrees. There's our 180 to get through a normal period. So 360 divided by 180 is 2. So it's 2x. So it's y equals -3 cosine 2x minus 1. And I actually think I have a graph for that. There it is. Y equals 3 cosine 2x minus 1. If you graph that, look, it's the same thing because I just copied it from there. All right. So that is. You should now be able to say I can graph a cosine function and I can find the equation of a cosine graph. If you have questions, please ask. Thanks.